Now please understand that through the years, through history, shamans, medicine men, witch doctors, voodoo priests, you could study world history, these men were often involved in hallucinogenic psychopharmacology or pharmaceuticals, okay? Whether it was using mushrooms, like sacred mushrooms. In fact, the American Indians to this day take peyote in what kind of ceremonies? Do they just take it for pleasure? They take it for what reasons? Spiritual reasons. Are you getting this now? They're taking these drugs. It's legal in our country among Native Americans to take certain hallucinogens just for pleasure and to go on a trip with strobe lights? No. But what? To contact what world? The spirit world. Timothy Leary, the drug guru, the apostle of drugs in the 1960s, he started the League for Spiritual Discovery. And LSD, League for Spiritual Discovery. What's he talking about? I thought it was this whole, it was in the party, you know, and everything else. No, man. Leary knew. League for Spiritual Discovery. It got one in contact with the spiritual world. You see, what's incredible about this is the slant that the Bible shows us that's really happening. If you study these guys and watch where it's coming from and where it's going, it's exactly what's going on. You see? It's sorcery through what? Through drugs. It's contacting the demonic world through drugs. In fact, what's interesting to me is when you study this subject, which I have off and on for years now, I used to use LSD, I used to smoke pot and do speed and all that stuff, like a lot of you guys have, and the Lord saved me out of it. But one thing I went through, when I went through especially LSD, but also other drugs, marijuana, by the way, is a psychedelic drug. It's just a milder psychedelic drug than LSD. Cocaine has psychedelic, you can have psychedelic experiences or hallucinogenic experiences like paranoia through cocaine, and I see some people I know that were on coke that are shaking their head, yes, you know, how many of you did coke and you had, you became paranoid, and, some people hear voices, all kinds of things like that. Mescaline, peyote, and so forth. Although some of them aren't classified under hallucinogens, like marijuana has been classified for years as a narcotic, but it's a mild hallucinogenic. You have thoughts that aren't your thoughts, You open yourself up to the spirit world. What's interesting to me is all these drugs that mess with your mind, right? That mess with your mind and open you up in one way or another would fall under the category of psychopharmaceutical. Now, please understand this. The Bible condemns Eastern mysticism. The Bible condemns. Jesus says not to pray repetitiously. The Bible talks about resurrection, not reincarnation. The Bible talks about one God, not many gods. The Bible talks about God being separate from creation, not God in all of his creation and being the creation. You see, these things that became popular in Hinduism, many Hindus used, hashish or hemp and other drugs to get their experiences. They open themselves up to the spirit world. When you look at India right now, it's a religious system in Hinduism where they're worshiping rats and cows, not eating meat, starving all over the place. Disease is spreading from the rats, and it's pathetic, but Satan has them totally bound, you see, because of opening themselves up to the spiritual world. In the Western world, especially here in the United States, these things were rejected. This religious system of the East was rejected. Drugs were rejected. For the most part, they were considered taboo. It wasn't until the 1950s that what happened. In the 1950s, with the beatnik movement, drugs started to come to life to a degree. And it was in the 1960s that they really boomed. People started opening themselves up to the demonic spirits through drug use. And I'm going to be quoting the leaders in the drug movement to prove this, man. In fact, you know what? I could put my Bible over here. I would not do that, though. And just look at what the leaders in the drug movement, like Leary and others, have said. And show you that it's totally demonic, man, at the core. Okay? Now, following this through, in the 1960s, when they began to experiment with all these different drugs, guess what religious systems they adopted in the hippie movement? Hinduism, man. Basically a McDonald's version of Hinduism. And basically that was Satan pushing his New Age doctrine. And we'll see how this all comes together as we move on. What's interesting to me is the different spiritual names given to drugs. Okay, spiritual names given to drugs. Let me give you a few examples. For instance, one type of mushroom is called magic morning glory. LSD is sometimes called instant Zen, referring to Buddhism, and instant revelation. PCP is often called angel dust. because you open yourself up to spirits. Or demon dust, or cosmos. Psilocybin refers to sacred mushrooms, or divinatory fungi. See that? Sacred mushrooms. Divinatory, meaning contact with the divine. Fungi. Remember, if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will be like who? God. Divinatory fungi. And flesh of the gods. Even alcohol is referred to as what? Spirits. And how many of you, when you knew you shouldn't have drank something, you drank it, and you all of a sudden realized you were having thoughts you wouldn't have normally had, right? And you had inclinations and propensities that you wouldn't have ordinarily acted under. Now, if Timothy Leary, and he moved from being the apostle of the drug revolution into being basically the messiah of the psychedelic revolution in the 1960s, if he's a father of the psychedelic revolution, so to speak, or I should say messiah of the psychedelic revolution, the one who is the actual father of LSD, and perhaps you could say the psychedelic revolution, is the research chemist who in 1938 synthesized and discovered LSD. His name, anybody know his name? Albert Hofmann, okay? Albert Hofmann is the one who discovered LSD. Very important to understand. 1938, years back. Now, it's interesting to me. Listen to this quote by Albert Hofmann, and this is some of the research I've come across in my research recently. Albert Hofmann wrote a book, LSD, My Problem Child. LSD, My Problem Child. He wrote it because he said there were many different accounts about how he actually discovered LSD, and he wanted to set it straight on how he discovered it, because LSD specifically is probably the most potent can opener for demons, so to speak, to get into your brain and your heart. They'll use all kinds of different drugs, but man, you can become demon-possessed. I'll tell you right now, if you get tempted into messing around with drugs, you are opening yourself up to demon possession. I'm going to prove that to you as we go on. That's why, you know, so many people that have been using drugs, they end up in mental hospitals. They think they can handle it. It leads to drugs lead to demon possession, which lead to insanity, which lead to suicide. Okay? Drugs lead to demon possession, which leads to insanity, which leads to suicide. And I don't care where you are on that ladder, man. Whether you're here, or here, if you're still in the first one and you haven't achieved the other three, just being involved in the first step will land you in the lake of fire and outside of the kingdom of God. Because it's a rebellion against the will of God. Listen to what Huxley said about the 1960s and the hippie movement. He says, I'm talking about Albert Hofmann, okay? The pioneer, the founder, the scientist who discovered LSD. The existence of LSD was even regarded by the drug enthusiasts as a predestined coincidence. It had to be discovered precisely at this time in order to bring help to people suffering under the modern conditions. It is not surprising that LSD first came into circulation as an inebriating drug in the United States, the country in which industrialization, urbanization, mechanization, even of agriculture, are most broadly advanced. These are the same factors that have led to the origin and growth of the hippie movement that developed simultaneously with the LSD wave. The two cannot be disassociated. Okay? It would be worth investigating to what extent the consumption of psychedelic drugs furthered the hippie movement and conversely. You see, he understood that there was a relationship to taking psychedelics and the mushrooming, to use a strange pun, of the hippie movement. Now, listen to this. Marilyn Ferguson, she wrote this book here called The Aquarian Conspiracy. Marilyn Ferguson says something I believe quite interesting in her book. She's a New Ager, and she's calling it The Aquarian Conspiracy. And she calls it a conspiracy, and she points out that from the Latin word which we get conspiracy has to do with breathing together, you see, and how there's an actual breathing together of different people to bring forth this age of Aquarius, the New Age, the age of the Aquarian Conspiracy. Now keep in mind, what are we talking about, the New Age movement? Understand that the Bible tells us that there will be a counterfeit kingdom of God in the last days. In Revelation chapter 13, it talks about a world religion. It says all nations and kindreds and tongues will worship who? The beast. So you have a world religion. Jesus said that the false prophets, Luke chapter 21 verse 8, would be saying the time draws near.